So Boehly and Eghbali are getting a divorce then. So, what do we think? Do we think this is going to be a simple handshake and nod of the head? Or do you think we're looking at a full-scale territorial war? Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel today. My name is the Crimson Wolf, and welcome back to Let's Talk Chelsea. And today's topic of discussion is a massive one. The split of Todd Boehly and Clearlake Capital. Now, if you've been living under a rock for the past week, basically, then allow me to inform you that in recent days we have been informed that both Todd Boehly and Clearlake Capital are looking to buy each other out, which obviously entails one of them becoming full owner of the club while the other leaves. The initial report that came out obviously said that it looked like Clearlake were trying to buy out Todd Boehly, and that they believed Todd Boehly would sell his shares in Chelsea to them, giving them a much bigger majority sharehold of Chelsea, the club. However, in recent days, we have since learned that it is believed that Todd Boehly can raise the funds necessary, what is believed to be £2.5 billion, upwards of potentially, in order to buy out Clearlake. So what we thought was going to be a one-sided kicking to the curb of Todd Boehly has now turned into a territory battle. From the outside looking in, it looks like if one of these two was to emerge victorious, it would be Clearlake. They own upwards of 60% of the shares in Chelsea, with the others distributed among Todd Boehly himself as well as several other investors. So it looks likely that they would be the ones that take it on, and I can't see them wanting to give up their shares in Chelsea that particularly easily. But if Boehly is willing to put enough money in front of them, eventually they will say yes. These guys are not the Glazers, I will say that. I don't think they're intent on just farming this for money as much as it's worth. I think if you put enough money in front of them, I think they bought in for about 2 billion, Clearlake. So you put 2.5, possibly 3 billion in front of them, I think they'd probably take it. And I think Boehly would buy them out that way. Obviously giving himself the majority shares in front of the club, taking full control away from them. I did see from George Benson, if any of you are familiar with him, mention that he could possibly get it from somewhere in the Middle East. I did have a very similar thought, and you've got to imagine, we know over the past 2 years that both Boehly and Eghbali have made quite frequent trips to Saudi Arabia, which would likely mean they have very good connections there. So it could be discussed, or possibly it already has been, when Boehly's been over there, that them funding him taking full control of Chelsea. And we know what the Saudis are like, we know what the Middle Eastern countries are like in general. They have money coming out of their ears, so they'd be more than willing to put up that kind of money. I mean, we heard the Qataris put up, what, 4 billion for United? The only problem is with that is obviously the Premier League ratification of the sale. Obviously, Saudi also own Newcastle, which could be perceived as a problem. So it might have to be a different it might have to be a different Middle Eastern country that would do it. It might not be a problem. I don't particularly know how it would go. I could see there being problems with that kind of thing, though. It's a possibility to be considered, but I don't particularly believe it's likely. Boehly is a billionaire at the end of all of this. He does have money. Whether he has enough to appease Clearlake into selling their shares to him, I don't know. My personal take on the situation, and I stand with the majority of Chelsea fans on this entire thing, I would prefer if Todd Boehly was in charge. Todd Boehly is a sports businessman. He owns multiple sports clubs back in the US. He owns, I think, the majority stake in the LA Dodgers. He has a significant stake in the LA Lakers, I believe. He does have a lot of experience with sporting clubs. He was in full control for that first summer when these new owners took over. It wasn't Clearlake, it was him. and it didn't particularly go too well. We signed 6 players that summer. That was being Wesley Fofana, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Marc Cucurella, Raheem Sterling, Kalidou Koulibaly, and Carney Chukwuemeka. Of those 6 players, only half of them have stayed at the club. Obviously, those 3 being Wesley Fofana, Carney Chukwuemeka, and Marc Cucurella. Aubameyang and Koulibaly were both tossed out last summer, and Raheem Sterling has since been loaned out to Arsenal this summer. So that wasn't exactly the greatest example of what Boehly's capable of. However, I do believe Thomas Tuchel has to shoulder a bit of the blame for that, because the stories we all heard in that first summer was that Boehly was listening to Tuchel, and that Tuchel told him what he wanted, and Boehly gave him it. Now, to be fair, Tuchel did ask for other things. He did ask for Rafinha, and he did ask for Koundé, and he asked for Matthias de Ligt, and obviously they chose to go elsewhere. Obviously 2 of them going to Barcelona, and de Ligt going to Bayern. I think both of them are at fault. I don't particularly believe they recruited properly, and I don't believe Tuchel asked for what he wanted, really. So both of them are at fault for that, I believe. But I have more faith in Boehly to get this right than I would with Clear Lake. I've been a huge advocate for backing what these owners have been doing in more of a less confidence, more faith kind of approach. And they've made some good signings in that term. I'll give them that. The signing to Cole Palmer, obviously, I think Malo Gusto has been a very good signing. Noni Madueke is looking like a really good signing as well. However, they have also had some incredibly poor signings. Mikhailo Mudryk immediately springs to mind, as well as Axel Disasi, I don't particularly believe has paid off that well. I think some of their signings that they've made for the future, so the signings of players like Angelo and David Washington, Diego Moreira, I don't particularly believe they've paid off. Some of them I kind of get. Like, if they were cheap, Moreira's probably the perfect example of that. Like, we signed him for nothing. Like, he was literally a free transfer from the academy from Benfica. So there was no damage in that, really. So I get those kind of signings. But players that you're spending, like, quite a significant amount of money on, I'll use Amari Kellerman as an example. It's probably a bit of an unfair example because you haven't seen him play yet, but we spent 20 million on a guy whose market value is 1 million. Like, that's a bit absurd. I get why we did it, and I hope the Premier League doesn't get why we did it, because it was definitely for FFP reasons. I guarantee you that. Some of those signings are a bit questionable, to say the least. I think some of them will pay off in the long term. I think Kendrick Pius and Estevan Willian especially, I think, are incredible talents. I really like Andre Santos. I have high hopes for Aaron Anselmino when he returns from Boca in January. Some of them do have to be called into question. Others, I think, could pay off in the long term. So, Clear Lake haven't done the best job in charge. They've not done a great job. Probably their biggest mistake, and something that I originally thought was at the fault of Todd Boehly, turns out it wasn't, apparently, and this is 100% the biggest mistake they've made since coming into control of this club: putting Graham Potter in charge. That is, people always say the worst mistake these owners made was sacking Thomas Tuchel. No. Thomas Tuchel was going to get himself sacked. The way we were playing, the form we were in, Thomas Tuchel was getting sacked. Whether it was this lot or whether it was Roman, he was going. The problem was, they chose the wrong replacement. Absolutely wrong replacement. Graham Potter was the complete wrong replacement. He was sufficiently out of his league, sufficiently underprepared for a job of this magnitude, and it showed. Not just in the way we played, not just in his managerial style, but in the way he spoke as well. Like, the amount of times in press conferences and interviews we were hearing the boys gave everything when we played versus Nottingham Forest, or saying Nottingham Forest are a good team, which is something that my dad takes significant issue with and will never let go, by the way. Potter was supremely underdeveloped for a job like this. They went and got Pochettino, which was a far better replacement. They should have got Pochettino when they were looking for someone to replace Tuchel. And Pochettino would have done better than Graham Potter would 100%, because that would have been an experienced squad that Pochettino could have worked with. I don't think Pochettino did a particularly bad job last season. I think it faltered a lot at times, especially towards December, January time. It started looking really bleak then, but he turned it around, he picked it up, and we ended the season in 6th. So not too bad for Pochettino. I still think he wasn't a long-term solution, Pochettino. I think he was supposed to be there to get us back up there, help develop some of these players, and he did that. So now we need a Mourinho to his Ranieri, basically. Whether Maresca is that, who knows? But I don't particularly believe they've made the most sensible decisions all the time. I don't particularly believe sacking Pochettino was necessarily a sensible decision, not at the time anyway. They've made mistakes, and if they're not careful, they're going to make a lot more. The biggest thing that I've noticed between the two of them even is that they've gone in opposite directions on the extreme. Todd Boehly went in the extreme example of signing older, experienced, proven players with the likes of Sterling, Aubameyang, Eghbali, and Clearlake and Eghbali have gone in the complete opposite direction of signing younger players for the future. They've gone too far in either direction, both of them. You need a mix of both. You do need your experience, but you need some youth to bed in. Now, a lot of the players they have signed have been very good players. Obviously, as I mentioned previously, Cole Palmer, Malo Gusto, Nicholas Jackson looks like a very good player. Obviously, Noni Madueke. And I do believe some of their younger talents, obviously, as I previously mentioned, Esteban, Kendry, Anselmino, I think they have huge, huge potential, but that's what it is, potential. It's not proven. You need players for the here and now as well. Here and now that can drag you up games. Not necessarily as ancient as Thiago Silva, for example, but older, so your 27s to about 32 kind of range. Overall, to just put the rubber stamp on it, if I had a choice of who would take ownership of this, I have more faith in Boehly than I would in Clearlake. However, I think the longer this goes on, the more likely it is that Boehly is the one that gets bought out and Clearlake stays on, which is very unfortunate because maybe they get it right, but at the minute they're heading down a path that I don't particularly see the end of, and I don't like that. So they either have to tread carefully and change the way they're going to do this, or ideally let Boehly do it. So with that being said, I'm going to end this episode of Let's Talk Chelsea here. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe and drop a comment down below. Who would you prefer to take control of Chelsea and why? With that being said, I am the Crimson Wolf, the reddest Chelsea fan on the internet, and I will see you all next time. Good luck with it.